So, to the season, which is just past, Hugh, how would you assess it?
It was the weirdest season for a while for me. I think, that cliche of roller coaster, if I do it in my personal way, I was standing in Buenos Aires the day that Aberdeen beat Rangers. The game that did for Beale, and you say, that's the season, that's the league over. Then you fast forward to round about Santa getting booed time, Hearts beating Celtic, and people are saying, well, the real resignation setting in amongst the Celtic support, and a real expectation growing amongst the Rangers support that the title's heading across the river. And then, astonishingly, when you look at it as the dust settled, if you saw nothing of the Scottish football and you come out of a coma and you looked at the league table, you'd say, I see Celtic have run away with the league again.
Yeah.
8 points.
I know, it summed it up perfectly.
And 93.
93 points.
Which is in keeping.
All difference far superior.
Although when you look at it, Celtic won 29 matches, they lost 3, they drew 6. Rangers won 27. They lost 7 matches and drew 4. That was their overall record. But it's a strange sort of season, as Hugh mentioned there, Alison, because although Rangers eventually faded away and Celtic stepped up to the plate with a strong finish, it's certainly through pundits, through various journalists, and more often than not, football fans who know their football, Celtic were not really that inspiring.
I think they came to the boil just at the right time. I think, as Rodgers had said, that they come to life in the last couple of months of the season. I think you saw that. I thought that arguably their best games of the season came at the death. I think that performance against Hearts was huge. That 3-0 win, come flying out the traps. It was a confident display. It was aggressive in a way that it was maybe not in keeping with how Celtic have played across much of the season. But I think they were the better team. I think just at points, what undermined them was an inability to kill teams off, to manage games. And I think you saw it at Ibrox, that 3-3 draw. The fact is that 6 draws across the course of the campaign, that's what had the potential to be their undoing. Just on top of games sometimes, dominating games, but not just getting over the line at times. But I think the performance against Kilmarnock, the performance against Hearts, the performance against Rangers at Celtic Park, I think it was a very confident finale from them.
Yeah, if you are following a man who's won a treble, he was one of the top candidates for the job. He certainly surprised us when he suddenly emerged as the man coming back, and coming back after leaving in very difficult circumstances. I don't think anybody, when you look at everything in context that was said, nobody was doubting his credentials as a coach, but I think they were looking for a spark. And that didn't materialise, and I would go as far as to say in 3/4 of the season, Hugh, because at times a lot of Celtic fans were moaning about the football and the style that they were watching. And of course you're going to win matches. You're stronger, by sometimes 4-5 to 1 in spending power against some clubs. Of course you're going to win games just by grinding it out.
Yeah, I think what happened, it's quite interesting listening to the sort of post-mortem, or Brendan's post-mortem of the season, when he says we've been written off, from day one, there was, negative stuff. And I'm thinking back, I can't remember any of that at all. I remember, you've got to remember when he came in at first, I think one Hearts result at Tynecastle early on, and you thought, this is, what was the problem was, there was a period where they round about the Hearts game, they lost a couple. What was the problem, as Alison pointed out, was not killing teams off. The other problem was this almost lethargic sort of horseshoe against teams, the low block.
Yeah.
And there was, people were saying, we'll have to be more incisive, we'll have to be quicker, we'll have to be... And I think that a lot of the problems there were, certain problems was personnel. But I think the big thing about... you can go on about everything about Celtic season, but I think the big players got fit at the right time. You had Carter Vickers, O'Reilly, Hatate and McGregor fit at the end of the season, and I think they're in Scottish terms They're the elite.
If I was being, really honest about the whole appraisal, and I think there are a number of people who would offer this assessment of it, is the fact that he inherited a squad, some of them that he looked at and thought, not good enough. And I think whereas Ange Postecoglou was able to come in and demand an early signing of players, what we eventually witnessed for Celtic was a role reversal. I think the board went back to what it's gone to before. He didn't get players he wanted in the summer. He came out and said that, and then he was quickly reeled back in. And then in the January transfer window, he wanted a certain calibre of player. He didn't get that. And I always, as I said to you on many occasions, with Rangers and Celtic, the assessment of the season always follows into two parts. August to December to assess your European campaign, and then January to May to assess how you're going to win the honours. And after that, he then realised that he had to make do with the squad that really wasn't his, and try and get the best out of them. And I don't think they responded as quickly as he would have liked. And I certainly think if you had that manager out with the PR machine that is Celtic, he would have told you a totally different story. I don't mind his defiance at the end, because at the end, Brendan's a winner. And if he wants to leather people, fair play, on you go.
I think he was probably stung a bit. I think it's been a very different environment he came back to than the one he operated in the first time, when, people were throwing garlands at his feet all the time because, an invincible treble, this fast football, guys like Scott Sinclair, able to play the kind of football that he wanted, winning everything, lording it over teams domestically, and then obviously the very abrupt ending. So he came back to a very different environment. But I think too, at the start of the season, there was a hangover from Celtic fans. I think they were devastated at the way they lost Ange Postecoglou. I think everyone had bought in to what he was doing, what he was playing. I think when news started to break this time last year that Spurs were interested, Celtic fans didn't want to know. And the build up to last year's Scottish Cup final, there's an accusation that the media are stirring the pot, and there's no substance to this, and you try to unsettle.
And he was very clever the way he evaded it.
Well, he danced on the head of a pin. The press conference before that Scottish Cup final, I think, and obviously Written's a different environment. When you're away from cameras, it can be a bit more informal. But he danced on the head of a pin for 15 to 20 minutes, which is a long time to prevaricate and be pushed. And it was probably the angriest that he got that we had seen.
Yeah.
But it's almost a we know, we know, but we can't. We can't for many reasons.
All managers get angry when they're exposed.
But I think Celtic fans, there was a hangover from Ange going, and then obviously there was a split about Brendan coming back. There was still a soreness about whether or not he was the right guy to come back. So whereas the first time he came back, they had to open the stadium to like 14,000 people come in and salute him. He came back, and I think there was maybe a couple hundred people on the steps, and it was a very different way. Also, I think what's forgotten about is how integral Jota and Abada had been to how Ange Postecoglou's side played. And obviously the Abada situation became hugely difficult and problematic for the club and for the player. Jota's exit again, which was fairly abrupt, I think, left a massive hole. And you think of how instrumental they'd been with goals, with assists, and just that width that Celtic had. And I still think they've not really compensated.
Yeah, and with the second part of it, my criticism of them is quite simply, Hugh, that in that final quarter, he's had numerous signings which clearly are not the level that he wants. And he's had a plethora of wingers brought in, and he comes out with the line, James Forrest, the best winger at the club. Now, remember, the best lines are the ones that the manager sometimes tries not to say. When you read between the lines, there are 2 or 3 times when he's been reeled back in, but James Forrest's return to that squad galvanised them.
Absolutely, and Forrest. I mean, I'm glad for Forrest personally, because Forrest is on the cusp of being one of the greatest Celtic players ever. And I use this.
You're talking about from a Ward's point of view.
Yeah. I mean, he's now up with Billy McNeill, and he's chasing down Bobby Lingers. He could be the most decorated Celtic player in history.
And
It's
people
astonishing.
were still sitting on the fence over whether or not he was
should
good
get-
enough.
yeah. And a guy, so, I mean, you know, I'm pleased for Forrest because a lot of times when he was even in his pomp, he was going under the radar with people. So glad that he's
Think of all the songs that Celtic fans have for players that have passed through. When have you ever heard that James Forrest song?
Yeah, it's difficult to get something that rhymes with it. That's the problem.
But I think there is a perception that he's never quite.
never quite grabbed everybody. I always rated, I think he's very technically very good. Remember the goal he scored outside his foot early on against Hibs years and years ago. The interesting thing about all this is because you were talking about the elements of the season, which are absolutely bang on about, of course. But one of the great elements about Celtic and Rangers, and every manager, but Celtic and Rangers in particular at the end of the season, as soon as it starts, as soon as it finishes, it starts again. Mm-hmm. So the conversations in the bars and supporters buses on Saturday, and more so come this Saturday, will be, but where do we go next? What does he need now? And and they're all talking about the Rangers rebuild. I was thinking down there saying, see the Celtic rebuild, I think they need a goalkeeper, a left back, 2 centre backs, a midfielder, a centre forward, and a winger.
Yeah. But the other thing about it is,
How many do you think they'll get?
yeah, well, how many of quality? I think that's what Brendan Rodgers is going to stick his, and dig his heels in. Is listen, I want the quality rather than the quantity, and can you empty out all your projects? I think that's his demand. That's a build. And we've given our assessment of Celtic winning the league and fair play to the manager. And as I said before, based on any criticism that's come his way, I think, providing it's constructive, if he wants to have a dig at people, absolutely. As long as you can face him up and square him up.
That's the game.
I can't wait to meet him on that point.
I'm sure he enjoyed it. I'm sure he would have felt thoroughly vindicated.
The flip side of it all is Rangers at one point, and this is where I think sometimes the nonsense of the spin comes in, Hugh, because for me, I don't know how he managed to do it, and I tell you, it was a great piece of PR from Michael Beale from start to finish on managing one of the top clubs in Great Britain, and he should never have had the job. And he gets found out quickly, very quickly. And I think the Rangers fans absolutely got to the point where they thought, hey, wait a minute, we've been duped here. And then basically all the nonsense that he brought out in press conferences came back to haunt him. And the team, woeful. Mm-hmm. So he lost his job, and in comes Philippe Clement. And again, this is a man who quickly turned it around, but by turning around the mediocrity and the ineptitude of Michael Beale, you have a good coach who served his time, knows what he's doing. He comes in, steadies the ship, but even Philippe Clement was well aware, I can steady this ship with what I've got, but it's not my team.
Yeah, and I think you've seen that in the last few weeks of the season. And I think you've seen the pressure on Clement. Mm-hmm. And I think Clement has made a few major missteps. The most recent one where he, when he's talking about, I've improved Rangers. We were 7 points behind. Now we're only 6 points behind. Well, that came to backfire on them 2 reasons, because they ended up 8 points behind. Yeah. So he actually lost ground on Beale. But the other thing was, what was he saying that for? Do you think, does he think the Rangers supporters were all sitting, well, oh mind you, we're only 6 points behind now instead of the 7. I just feel, with Clement, I feel there should be somebody within Ibrox who says, can I have a word? Come here. And, I've been here a long time, but these are not the things you should be saying in press conferences. They're hostages to fortune.
There's not enough strong people in there to take you down that path.
Even the fun comment, I thought, biting on that was silly, because there's nowhere it can go. when Rodgers, and to be fair, I had a bit of sympathy for Rodgers with that. I thought it was taken out of context a bit, and then you know how it works in a press conference, or he's saying this, and then you want a reaction. To me, the sensible thing to do is just to say, well, we'll do our talking on the pitch. Let's just look forward to the game. Just close it down rather than amplify it, and then before you know it, you have a whole narrative in the build-up to that week that runs around something that's got away from you.
Yeah, the other thing about it as well is he quickly realised that the players and that he still had and that he wanted to go, into the trenches with, no matter how hard they were blowing, they couldn't actually back it up. You've got a guy in Dessers who scored, 21, 22 goals, not convincing, Rangers fans not convinced by him, missed big chances in big games. You have a guy in the middle of the park who is more happy, going on social media rather than doing his talking on the pitch in Cantwell. And you have a whole load of people just saying, well, wait a minute, let's slaughter the captain. And for me, there's 6 or 7 players in front of him before you start slaughtering the captain, because Barisic's not going to win it. Yilmaz's always injured. Central defence not good enough. Middle of the park not strong enough to handle Celtic in any capacity over the 4 games. And the fact that Matondo comes up with a worldie saves them from 4 defeats over the course of the season. So I think the big key issue now for Rangers is to try and work out a way to back Philippe Clement. And I know for a fact that they have people coming in to Ibrox, investors. They're trying to get investors to invest, to allow them to back him, to give him enough money. Whether these people that they've been courting will actually jump on the bandwagon and say, okay, we'll give you the money and let the manager have a go at it. The biggest signings for Rangers this summer will be people who are willing to give them substantial amounts of money to try and stay neck and neck with Celtic. Celtic could have somewhere in the region, Alison, of about 150 to 200 million pounds coming into the coffers.
Well, you think the Champions League money this season is going to be about 60 million pounds. I think everyone would anticipate a bid for Matt O'Reilly. I think Celtic will make a substantial profit, arguably a Scottish transfer record.
Don't jump in with a figure you'll bet
Matt O'Reilly. No, I wouldn't know where to begin, but I think you would. It wouldn't be outlandish to suggest there'll be a new Scottish transfer record for a boy at 23 who is now ready to take the next step in his career. I think Celtic's finances are so robust to start with. They go into it in a very good position. To be so further enhanced gives them an opportunity now to cement this dominance that I think they've enjoyed for the bulk of the last 2 decades, more than that. I don't think any kind of investment at Rangers takes them close to that on a realistic sense.
Well, if they don't get it, they're staring into the abyss here. I mean, it's three titles now. It could be another 9 in a row unless this season they get some serious money in to back them.
But the problem with Rangers is that Rangers historically, and it is historically, make a loss. They just make losses all the time. They came out last year, we made an operating profit. Well, did you? Once you get the tax into it, you're actually... Rangers make a loss. Another thing is, the other historic thing about Rangers is people come in, put their money in, and don't get it back. They get it back in the confetti of shares and all that. But the Parks have had some of their money back. There's guys, and I always have a wry smile when you hear people slagging the Rangers board, because whatever you say about the Rangers board, these guys have put their hands in their pockets. The guys like Bennett, Leatham, these are guys that put their own money, in the club. So there's got to be another model. There's got to be a model.
That's what I think. And even the recruitment model has to be different.
Changed.
You cannot possibly go out and spend £15 million on a player and bring in wages at 30, 40 grand a week. Even at Celtic, that's a headache. For Rangers and Celtic, I think the biggest model has to be a recruitment model where you recruit with some intelligence to meet the financial demands that you have at the club and work within the parameters of what you've got. It's never a popular decision if you look at what's happened with Celtic, but that's where you will find Hitatis, O'Reillys, young guys, hungry to learn, for a bit of exposure, a stage to perform on, and then to take the next step in their career. It's the only...
But Rangers have gone all in and sort of winning titles. See, even at Christmas there, they went, you know, with the loan signing Silva. I mean, you hear incredible amounts of what Silva's getting.
Eye-watering.
Eye-watering.
It was on 75 grand a week, but Rangers weren't paying 75.
They were paying they were paying half of it.
What I hear, they were paying more than half of it.
Yeah.
And you say to yourself, what? And
look at the return. When you look at the return for that,
it's a big call for them. I think this summer's huge, and it's huge for the board in how they attract the investors. If they don't, there's a long, painful summer ahead for Rangers, and you know, the early indications of they're interested in this player and interested in that player. It'll be interesting to see the calibre of player that they're going to have to recruit to try and bridge that gap, and also change the mentality within the squad to go to Celtic Park, win the league. That's a huge call against the power financially that we've been talking about.